Good morning to everybody. How you doing? Hope all's well. Keep up the beautiful work. Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. Today is Monday, Parashat Ekev. May Am Yisrael only see good things. We really could use the Mashiach. We really, really could. We need the hostages home. We need the soldiers home. We need Am Yisrael home. Definitely Mashiach is happening. It's happening. You see the chess pieces moving. You see this one against us, this one against us. They're voting. But we just want it to be a little quicker. We'd rather it be Fortnite speeding style instead of just playing chess. Of course, we don't let our children play Fortnite, but that's another subject. Anyway, good things for everyone. We're discussing the laws, Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach, of Kiddush on Shabbat. Kiddush on Shabbat, there is a halacha that we know. First of all, it's possible a couple of scenarios which we have on Friday night and which we have on Saturday morning. If God forbid a million times someone's not feeling well on a Saturday night, Friday night, excuse me, and they do not make kiddush, it is a commandment from the Torah to make kiddush. However, if somebody prays the Amidah, then the kiddush becomes midrabanan because we say Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh Shabbat. That's already Kiddush. When Kippur falls out on Shabbat Kodesh, we say to have in mind before the Amidah to fulfill the obligation of Kiddush from the Torah. And we say Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh Shabbat. If Kippur falls out on Shabbat, obviously you can't eat. Obviously it's Doche Shabbat. Kippur is Kippur. However, you have to have kiddush, and we don't make kiddush on grape juice. Making kiddush on grape juice is only from the chachamim. The rabbis added that. How and the amidah is the oraita. However, if someone wouldn't pray amidah, then they have to make kiddush on a cup of grape juice. The cup of grape juice itself is midrabanan, but the actual kiddush is from the Torah as well. So regarding Kiddush on a Friday night, if someone, God forbid, missed it on a Friday night, let's say far away in Neverland, there was a Mazal party that got out of hand. And somebody comes home, and this is exactly why the rabbis are against those Mazal parties in Neverland. That if a guy drank too much, then he comes home, he says, I'm just going to take a nap for 5 minutes. And then he wakes up Saturday morning about 10 o'clock to get to shul with the later of the later minyanim. So now he missed Kiddush on a Friday night. May Am Yisrael only see good things. But if God forbid someone's not feeling well, or if a woman is giving birth, Bezrat Hashem b'sha'at tovah, and the husband could not make Kiddush Friday night, he has to say the text of the Kiddush of Friday night on Shabbat morning. That's one thing to have in mind. Thing number two to have in mind, as we know, which we'll talk about, is Kiddush b'mkom seudah. You have to have a meal to make the Kiddush come into effect. Now, if a person wants to, sometimes in a minyan, together with the rabbi, following the halachot, they want to have maybe a little class, especially in the winter when Shabbat is at about 4:10, 4:11, and already you finished shul at 5:15, unless the rabbi gives a nice long sermon. It's a little longer. However, now you want to have a class or something. So there are people that have classes that are done with rabbinic advice and supervision in their homes with a little maza, where all the wives and family agree. Obviously, far away in Neverland, you might have a husband that the wife would rather not. She wants him to come home, etc. There was one time in Wisconsin a group of guys after shul, they would go to each other's houses and have drinks. And one of the wives said, "That's not what we do." And like we said, everything in moderation. And each one has to do things well with wisdom. Sometimes we want to get a point across, and we have to do things where even though we want something, you don't give a fish a nice kibbeh with tahina to catch a fish. You might catch a piranha with one of those, but you put a worm. Sometimes you have to give the other what they want, not what you want. But anyway, like we said, everything is done with rabbis. Every family has their local rabbi that advises them, etc., to make sure they do the proper item. But anyway, when we were in Wisconsin and they had that group of fellows that were having that group of drinks every week, comes along a wife and says, "That's what we do. How about you turn it into a Torah class?" And they called yours truly. And for years, we were giving a class every single Shabbat after prayers together with the boys, and the wives agreed. And it was beautiful, beautiful class. Baruch Hashem, Yishtabach Shemo. So now, what do we do in the winter when the wife makes? Well, the wife is home. The husband goes to his friends with the permission of the wife, and the rabbi is giving a class. And now they make kiddush over there, and they eat a little. Number one, is he allowed to come home and make kiddush again? We know the famous rule: Kol Yisrael arevim zelazeh. We are all responsible for one another, and therefore a husband can make havdalah for a wife if he already heard havdalah. A husband can make kiddush for a wife if he already heard kiddush. Now, Saturday morning kiddush does it's no problem. You can make it 1,000 times because all it is borei pri gefen. There is no beracha baruch atah Hashem mekadesh Shabbat on Saturday morning. So you can make hagefen in shul, and even though you heard it already, you come home, you can make hagefen once again for the missus. That is not a problem. But even in a situation, let's say Friday night, when it was done in a kosher manner, and now he has to make kiddush in the home, is he allowed to? So the rule is, when someone is not learned enough to be able to make kiddush, you are allowed to fulfill their beracha and make it for them. However, that's only if you yourself had or have an obligation. Meaning to say, if a woman gave birth, God bless the shelemah, and she has to make hagomel, what do you do? Let's say she did it. Let's say it's a girl. If it's a boy, usually by the Zohar, there's 10 men there anyway. So we make the girl makes hagomel. In Eretz Israel, they have a custom that's a little different than over here. Our community doesn't really do it. In Israel, the mechitzot are bulletproof. You don't know who's behind that mechitza whatsoever. So what happens is the woman screams hagomel from the women's section, and then they say, "Okay, let's get ready," and they hear her say hagomel when they're about to put the Torah away. However, in our community, like we said, we don't really do that because number one, we could see the woman in the mehitza, and the woman will get bashful, etc. So we follow the halachot and the guidelines of the customs of our community. But anyway, back to our subject: can a husband make hagomel for his wife? And the answer is 1,000,000% no. If he flew and he's obligated hagomel, then of course he could say hagomel if she gave birth, because he's as obligated as she is. However, over here, when it comes to kiddush, he can make the beracha kiddush for her, even though he heard it already, because he was in the parasha of being obligated in the kiddush, and therefore he can do it. And the same thing goes for havdalah. Usually, Murphy's law on a Saturday night is, when the husband hears it in shul, the wife didn't hear it at home. And if the husband does not hear it in shul, then the wife already heard it with the neighbor, etc. That's usually how it works. But like we said, even if he did hear it, he's allowed to make the havdalah when he gets home for the missus or the children that are over bar mitzvah. Now, regarding Kiddush Memkom Seudah, it says in the Pasuk, which we read every Saturday morning in the actual Kiddush, V'karata l'Shabbat oneg. Those are Pesukim in Chaya. We learn a lot of halachot out of those Pesukim. Im tashim mishabat raglecha, etc. So we say the words v'karata l'shabbat oneg. You shall call the Shabbat, and then it says oneg. Not that you should call Shabbat oneg. Oneg means delicacies, enjoying, having pleasure. Not that Shabbat is all about pleasure, even though it is. And when Mashiach comes, we call, which is coming soon, Be'ezat Hashem, just sooner than later, please Hashem. And it's going to be one long Shabbat when we really love a Shabbat without the women having to slave. God bless, right? Far away in Never Neverland, it's possible that the husband is sitting like a melech, eating and with his belt open, maybe after a nice meal, and the wife is the one cleaning the table. She's the one that prepared. Obviously, we all have to chip in and do our part. Baruch Hashem. Sometimes the husband pays for a housekeeper to do it that's doing a good job, etc. Anyway, the rule is v'karata l'Shabbat. Once you call the Shabbat and you make kiddush, then it's a kama. Then we say oneg. That's when you have to have the delicacies of Shabbat, and we learn from there that there is a concept of kiddush b'mkom seudah. Your kiddush does not take effect unless you had a seudah, a kiviut seudah, an ounce of mizonot, an ounce of 3 ounces of grape juice does count. Majority of 3 ounces out of you eat of grape juice does count for kiddush. So the one making the kiddush, if he does drink the amount that you're supposed to, a rov revi'it, then he does fulfill his obligation with kiddush. There are those that say on a Friday night, the Mishnah Berurah says that does not work. The one making the kiddush, you can't double dip according to the Mishnah Berurah. Meaning to say, when you have 3 ounces of grape juice, you fulfill your obligation of kiddush because that is a seudah. However, if you're the one making kiddush, then when you make kiddush, so you have to have 3 ounces of grape juice when you have the kiddush. So are you allowed to double dip those 3 ounces and say it works to fulfill the kiddush and it works to make it that he had seudah? And the answer is survey says the Ashkenaz are strict, but Hamavadia says it does work, which means if a person had only 3 ounces, then the Kiddush worked, then you're allowed to eat other things on a Friday night. Now, when you do eat other things on a Friday night, you have to be careful. Usually, especially when Shabbats are late, somebody might be hungry right after you make a deuce. So, what do you do? Are you allowed to eat and take a little kibbles and nibbles, or what's it called? Kibbles and nips, whatever it is, kibbles and bits. Are you allowed to take a little nibble here and a little nibble there? And the answer is, Hawaya does not like when a person has more than an ounce of food before hamotzi. And the reason for that is because when a person has an ounce of food, then you have to make beracha charona. Now we know if you're about to wash hamotzi, then you're going to end up making hamotzi. You're going to end up making birkat hamazon. So the birkat hamazon is going to cover you for the food that you ate before, but you're putting yourself in a position where you need a beracha charona, and after beracha, after you eat before hamotzi. So therefore comes along Rabino Grande, and he says if you're going to eat less than the measurement, which isn't so easy, which means that you could have a half of a chicken nugget and that's it, because if a chicken nugget weighs an ounce, that's it. You already need borer vashor. Now, not to talk lashon hara, but far away and never land, there is there are maybe in-laws that take forever and ever and ever and ever to eat and to do, etc. So they can make kiddush and then they could talk for another half hour before they make hamotzi. And one time a kid asked, could I eat? I'm not bar mitzvah yet. And the father said, by the time they get their act together, you'll be bar mitzvah. And he was only 6. How you doing? Anyway, back to our subject. Let's say a person's going to be able to eat and make a beracha charona and still wait and then make hamotzi. hamotzi. Technically, if that would be the case, that is also allowed, no problem, even according to Rabino Grande. Of course, most people know that right after we make kiddush, we like to make hamotzi right away because of this concept of kiddush b'mkom seudah. Not only that, people build a sink in their dining room so they can make netilat yadayim right away. Some people won't even. Some people might right away have a seudah, which, like I said, according to Batya, is not the proper way of halacha, but each to their own. I once went to a Talmid Chacham's house in Eretz Israel. He should rest in peace. We should all live and be well. He had cake on the table, and the second kiddush was over. Everyone had a piece of cake. Not that I'm complaining about eating cake. However, then you get into the problem once again. So it's a kireach mikan lo mikan. The rabbi says technically, because if you're going to eat the cake, then you're obligated to make al mechia, but you don't make al mechia because you're going to wash hamotzi. So the best thing to do, according to the halacha, is to wash netilat yadayim as soon as possible. Make hamotzi as soon as possible. Now, whenever I hear the words hamotzi on a Friday night or Saturday, we always have to remember that person from Jiddiesville, USA, because the rule is, we mentioned it a couple of times, when the father or the grandpa, whoever it is that makes hamotzi in the house, says the beracha and he eats, so some people start to talk. Are you allowed to talk? We know if you pick up your cup of coffee, you make shahakol, and then you say, "How did the Yankees do last night?" Even though we might like the Yankees, however, the rule is you're not allowed to talk. You have to make a new shahakol on that cup of coffee because you're making a hefsek between the beracha and the drinking. So the same thing technically applies Friday night or Saturday day when the father makes hamotzi and now he took a bite. If the daughter or the son or the cousin or the aunt or the guest that pops in talks, do they have to make another beracha if they spoke about something that does not pertain to the hamotzi? The rule is, believe it or not, even though you might think that yes, they have to make the beracha because it's like when they heard the beracha, it's like they made the beracha. Shomea keoneh. When you hear someone making a beracha, fulfilling your obligation, it's like you made hamotzi. When you hear kiddush, it's like you made kiddush. So the same thing applies over here. You might think that it's like he made hamotzi and then he talks before he ate. Does he have to make a new beracha? And the answer is if the master of ceremonies ate the bread, the father, the grandfather who made hamotzi, he made hamotzi, he ate the bread. If someone in the family, they should not talk, obviously, but if someone did talk, the rule is they do not need a hamotzi because they were fulfilled their beracha taking effect with the eating of the one who made hamotzi. So that's something we have to keep in mind as well. And like we said, once you make hamotzi, then it's as if you had kiddush b'mkom seudah. Now, a lot of times on a Saturday morning, the synagogue makes kiddush, and somebody answers amen, and he listens, and he takes a little shot of this, a little shot of that, whatever it might be, drinking responsibly, lichvot Shabbat, etc. Are you allowed to do that now? Technically, the rabbi makes hagefen, and then you have a tiny teaspoon worth of tequila or whatever it might be, and you're over 21 and you want to take a sip. Now, you do not fulfill your obligation of seudah with that drink. It has to be, like we said, one of the things that require you to make ala mechia, the 7 species of Eretz Israel, or the or mezonot is part of that. So yes, it has to be 7 species of Eretz Israel. So now technically it's possible that somebody doesn't do that on a Saturday morning. He might take a piece of string cheese. He might take a little, like we said, a teaspoon of tequila. Was he allowed to do that? Because technically he's not having mezonot. He's not having something that's considered seudah. Are you allowed to now have that tiny drop of tequila because if the kiddush didn't take effect, then how are you allowed to do that? technically, if that's all he had when he goes home and he wants to eat, he has to make kiddush again because that kiddush did not have a seudah, so it's not considered halachically a full-fledged kiddush. So the rule is Hamad brings down that there is what to rely on if you're in the seudah and you're not having mizonot, you're not having seudah, but you want a little take a little taste of something. You are allowed to, but you have to know. He even said when he was a youngster, he saw the great Gedolim of Yerushalayim doing that. The great Gedolim of Yerushalayim, forget about what that world was all about. Yishtabach Shemo La'ad. So the rabbi says it's better not to, but of course there is what to rely on. Because if a rabbi would go to somebody's house or a sabbat or something, and they make kiddush and he doesn't eat anything, they're going to get insulted. So he has a tiny little taste, but he doesn't want to have a whole seudah. So that is considered b'diavad. He has to, and he was allowed to drink that, but when he gets home, he has to make a new kiddush. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, also, whenever we talk about kiddush, we know the rule for Sephardic, it's a little stricter that the item we make kiddush on, first of all, a lot of people think that if you could make kiddush on whatever it is, tequila, vodka, etc., or bourbon, or I know one guy, he has so much bourbon, he brushes his teeth in the morning with bourbon. Anyway, are you allowed to make it on that? So the answer is no. If there's grape juice in the vicinity, or wine, then we hold you have to make it on wine or grape juice, right? Even a little further than the vicinity. If a guy sees on the table vodka or tequila, but and then in the kitchen there's grape juice, he says, "Let me make it on this." Of course, you should make it on grape juice. However, in a situation where there's none, then he can make Shabbat kiddush of the daytime on those items. And even believe it or not, technically, the rabbi says if there's no grape juice whatsoever anywhere to be found, or even a drink that's a alcoholic beverage, then a person Saturday day only can make a shakol on orange juice or something. But we can't tell that halacha to the wrong person because we live in an Uber Eats society, an Instacart society, and if someone wants, they need everything at their footstep 24/7. So now there might be grape juice in the kitchen. He hears the law with the orange juice. He just makes it on the table. Obviously, that is so not the halacha. Only if there's none around, then you are allowed in that situation. But when it comes to Friday night, of course, Friday night is way different. Friday night, Sephardic, we do not make on alcoholic beverages kiddush. We make the kiddush on the bread. If someone doesn't have grape juice or wine, and we spoke about this, so how do you do that? You make netilat yadayim, everybody, you sit down. You make the kiddush on the like you do regular Friday night, and instead of savri mananan bore priya gefen, you say hamotzi, and then you are good. With one more halacha on that subject, sometimes people have mashallah, a lot of people over, and they have a sukkah, and Baruch Hashem, till they get to the sukkah and everyone sits down, it's the Mashiach already. And then what's going to happen? They get everyone in the sukkah for kiddush, and now everyone has to go wash netilat yadayim and come back into the sukkah. That could take another 3 days. So some people tell the people, wash in before, sit down in the sukkah, make kiddush, and they don't have to get up and wash now, make the hamotzi. And Rabino Grande does not like that whatsoever. Hamavadya, he says that's not what you're supposed to do, so better not to do that. But we'll get into more laws when it comes to the subject, Be'ezat Hashem. But for now, we'll stop here today. I hope everyone has a greatest day. Keep up the excellent work. Good things always, Be'ezat Hashem. Sorot Tobot, Yeshuot V'Hamod. All the best. Take care. Bye.